Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I'm back in the booth again for another sneak peek preview for this week's new audiobook release here on Say with Jay. Today, we're taking a look at Jessie Gussman's A Mistletoe Mishap in the Show Me State. We're going back to Cowboy Crossing, Missouri for this one. It's book 7 in that series, and it's the story of Fire Chief Andrew Coleman. He's recovering from the tragic death of a very close friend, and he has some rooms for rent in his big, old family farmhouse, and Reagan Boyle, a young lady who needs a couple of rooms for herself and her brother, and fast. It's also the story of Gladys, a German Shepherd with a bit of an anxiety problem. Now, Andrew has rooms, Reagan needs some. Seems like that should be a fairly simple thing. But standing between them is a mistletoe mishap. Now, what is a mistletoe mishap, you might ask? Well, today's live video preview is going to explain just that. So sit back, enjoy, and then come back and see us on Friday, this Friday, for the full audiobook release of A Mistletoe Mishap in the Show Me State, here on Say with Jay. Andrew stood at the door, somehow disappointed that the girl in front of him had turned away. Her eyes had been the color of warm sugar cookies, expressive and hypnotizing, and he found himself feeling like they were talking without saying a word. It was an odd sensation. He didn't know her and had never seen her before, and it was probably fanciful thinking on his part, maybe brought on by the holiday season. Or maybe just the last week or so of owning a dog had affected him. He almost laughed at that thought. Gladys had affected him all right. She was so anxious and needy he could barely leave her alone. In fact, he didn't if he could help it, to the point of even taking her into the restroom with him. She lay on the floor while he showered, her eyes never leaving him. Interestingly, his dog was now cowering behind the girl's legs. Normally, if he were anywhere around, Gladys was glued to his side. It had been that way since he'd taken her home, like she'd instantly bonded with him. The woman in front of him wore a bulky sweatshirt and loose pants. It was impossible to see even a hint of a shape, not that it mattered. It was her eyes that intrigued him, or maybe the expression in them. Vulnerable and anxious, somehow they reminded him a little of Gladys, which was ridiculous. His dog pushed on the back of the lady's legs, and she stumbled toward him. He reached out a hand to catch her, her arm feeling thin through the material of her extra-large sweatshirt. "Sorry about that," he said, waiting until she seemed to have caught her balance before he dropped his hand. She turned the sugar cookie eyes on him again, and her lips parted. Before she could say anything, a burst of friendly laughter came from Doc Violet. He'd barely noticed her standing back by an exam room door in conversation with Heather Johnson. Actually, Heather Clark now, as she'd just married Cade Clark, son of one of the most influential families in Cowboy Crossing. Heather appeared to be trying to talk, even as she struggled to hold on to the leash of Dara, a part Newfoundland mix who was almost as big as Heather. Andrew had been out to Cade's many times, and Dara was a real sweetheart, even if she was as big as a small pony. "Look, Andrew and Reagan are standing under the mistletoe." Doc Violet didn't say any more, but she didn't need to. Heather was a romantic, and the whole town knew it, regardless of the pony and the grunt she'd married. Saying grunt in the most affectionate way possible, since Andrew considered Cade a great friend. "You know what that means. It'll be the first kiss of the season." Heather's eyes danced. "Huh, I don't even know if any of the other businesses have it up." "We decorate early for Christmas around here, and I just put that up this morning," Doc Violet said as she glanced at the Christmas tree in the corner, strung with lights shaped like bones and laden with dog biscuit ornaments. Andrew had no idea where a person would find decorations like that, but figuring that out was the least of his worries right now. He could back away and refuse to do what Doc Violet and Heather had just suggested, what mistletoe tradition demanded. But he didn't want the woman in front of him to get the idea it was her. Her eyes already seemed like they held more hurt and baggage than a woman as young as she deserved. Of course, he didn't want to force attention on her that she didn't want. Plus, she could be married. He could kiss her cheek. As though in answer to that issue, Doc Violet said, "I think the mistletoe tradition only demands kissing when the people caught under it are unmarried and available." "And my goodness, Reagan, you couldn't be caught under there with a more available man," Heather said with a gentle smile in her voice, her fondness for Reagan, who must be the woman in front of him, evident in her voice. Reagan. Different, but he liked it. It seemed to suit her. Her hair was darker than her eyes and fell down past her shoulders. Probably the conversation around her had made the red pop on her cheeks. Pretty. Young. He didn't go around guessing women's ages that often, but he'd be willing to bet she was 10 years younger than he. That made him even more determined to buss her cheek. She hadn't moved away, and already several awkward seconds had ticked by while he did nothing. He lifted a brow when she met his eyes, and she didn't shake her head, so he decided she'd come to the same conclusion. It was better to just do a simple kiss, make it so it didn't mean anything, and appease the people watching. He shrugged, gave a little what-can-you-do-about-it grin, and lowered his head, aiming for her left cheek. Unfortunately, Gladys, who'd been cowering behind the woman's legs and had already knocked her off balance once, either didn't like him moving toward the woman, maybe Gladys was protecting her, or maybe she was jealous. That was the more likely scenario in his mind later when he thought about it. Whatever it was, Gladys moved suddenly, knocking the woman off balance again and causing her to gasp. He reached out again to stop her, but was unable to halt the downward trajectory of his head as he opened his mouth to tell his dog to knock it off. Everything happened so quickly. Somehow the kiss that he planned, the peck that he'd intended, turned into a kiss he hadn't. Their mouths met. Shock rocked between them before something else seemed to take over. She sighed and pressed against him, and he forgot about steadying her with his hands on her shoulders and wrapped them around her back instead, deepening the kiss and feeling her tremble beneath him. His own heart shuddered and sparked, and his mind shut down, and the room seemed to disappear as he forgot about his good intentions and the people watching and the mistletoe and even the dog, and instead sank into the feelings of the 1,000 nights and countless lonely days, all disappearing. New thoughts cracked and opened and ripped away his unconscious thought that there would never be anyone for him, and the idea that a dog was better than a woman got shoved out of the way, and he quit thinking and focused only on the feeling of passion exploding and something blooming and coming to life, precious and delicate, strong and magnetic. He probably would have stood there and kissed her for a lot longer, but vaguely he heard clapping and what sounded like cheering. Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.